No matter how you may feel today, just realize the best version of yourself can only be 6 months away. Given that you make small changes now that will gradually compound over time. Because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And as time goes by, these patterns of low mood, low motivation, or low energy that you may be feeling now and procrastinating on all the ways in which that you can take care of yourself or maybe should take care of yourself, then those patterns just become more deeply ingrained into personality traits that become harder to rewire and repattern later on in life. Because no matter what, 6 months is going to go by one way or another. And this is what brings me to my first point, which is, do you find that you have more of what's called an external locus of control or an internal locus of control? Which basically states that either the world around you and your environment is affecting you and it's keeping you from achieving the things that you want, whether it's from being unlucky or that's just how I am, versus having an internal locus of control, which states that I have an effect on my environment. I can create things in my life. And that's not to downplay the fact that bad things do happen and circumstances that we don't prefer are causing a negative reaction within us. But what it is to say is that when those things happen, we can always turn inward and ask ourselves, how am I responding to this? And what things do I have control over? And then redirect our focus away from all the things that we don't prefer and towards the things that we can do right now to move in a positive direction. And it can be hard. I know exactly how that goes because the last time that happened to me, I had just finished my undergraduate degree and I finished up working part-time and doing hours here and there to get into physical therapy school in my graduate program. And I moved to a new state across the country from California to Tennessee to a place that I had never lived before. I'd never lived out of California, didn't know anybody there. And 3 months into my schooling, the pandemic happened. And so I was stuck in an apartment by myself in a city I've only lived in for 3 months, essentially with no one else around. I had some classmates that I knew, but for 2 or 3 months at that point, and nobody was allowed to leave. So I was really stuck in this pattern of feeling like a victim. Like there was all these things happening in the world that were affecting me that I had no control over. But really, there are always things you have control over. So if that feels like you today and you've been procrastinating, whether that's from low energy, low motivation, or low confidence, the best thing that you can do is have strategies moving forward to help you get there without making it forceful. Strategy number one is to create a checklist. And this will help clear out all the mental noise that you have going on and all the planning and strategizing that you're doing at this time. Instead, you can put it all out on paper, take it out of your head, and come back to it as many times as you need to. But specifically with this checklist, what I want you to do is create as many lines or items, at least 10, of all the behaviors or habits or things that you could be doing that you feel like intuitively, or just things that you know from whatever you've read or research or science that improves your health, your fitness, or just your emotional state. So if there are things that you've done before that you felt like you really enjoyed, and when you got into a routine like that, you felt better, then put that down. I have made my own list, and if you want something that's pre-made for you that is based off of research as well as what I use in my own life with my clients, there's a link in the description that you can download so that you could use that yourself and that you can save your own time. However, I do feel like it's important to add your own list because you will know best what has worked for you in the past. But in my case, there are certain things on there that if I am in a consistent routine with those items, I know I'm going to feel better. And not only that, there are certain things that we all know what it takes to create a healthier lifestyle, but we just don't do it, right? Or it's hard to get into a routine and stick to a routine with all of those things involved. Which again, when you have these things written down on paper, it makes it easier for you because you could put it in places that you will see constantly, whether it's on a whiteboard in your living room or your kitchen, which is usually where I'll have some of those lists that I can remind myself of what I need to do. Even if I don't necessarily need to do something that day, me constantly seeing that thing is going to slowly, right, create a reminder subconsciously in my head just because of the repetition. So when you write down as many things as you can, again, make sure you have at least 10. And then in strategy 2, we will organize those. Once you have the list, now it's time to eat the frog. And this is something I got from Dick Tracy to make for the most productive day. And how you're going to do that is once you have that list of 10, you're going to organize them into the top 3 behaviors that you feel like would be the most productive. And then out of those 3, which one do you find the most productive and the most valuable? Because really, everything boils down to there are a few actions or a few things, no matter whatever it is that you're working on or whatever goals that you have, that are going to move the needle the most, which goes back to the 80-20 rule. There are 20% of things that you can do to have 80% of the return. In this case, we want to make it even more, narrowed down so that it's just one thing. And those 2 other items, you can get to whenever you get to them. But if you just did that one thing every day, you will be moving in the direction of your goal. And that's great because we want to remove as much of the fluff as possible and build on why it's important to write these things down, to take all of these ideas out of your head, put them on paper, organize them, and then have a plan based on what you determine to be the most valuable action that you can take every day. And then where the eat the frog comes in is doing that thing first. So as you can imagine, eating the frog is kind of nasty when you think about it, and that's kind of the point, because you just want to get it over with. Don't sit there and wait around for that nasty thing that you've been dreading this whole time. Just get it done. Choke it down, get it out of the way, and the rest of your day, now you can focus on maybe items 2 or 3, or you can just have the freedom to do whatever it is that you want and feel good about getting that thing done early so that you can just relax, if that may be the case, for the rest of the day. Or just be proud of yourself, knowing that you did the most productive thing that you could do today. And then when tomorrow comes, when you have the time, the earliest thing, when you have available in the day, just get it done and move on to the next thing. Strategy 3 is the timer method. So whatever activity you're planning on doing for that day, give yourself a certain amount of time that you're going to spend on it. And once that time comes, you're done. And I like doing this by setting my phone timer on so that as you're going, whatever activity it is that you're doing, you can get lost in it. And once that timer goes off, you leave. So if it comes to the gym, you could even play around with it if it makes you feel better to start the timer even when you're at home. So if you tell yourself that you're going to work out for an hour, or you're going to spend an hour at the gym. And even before we get into that, I will just say, whatever time you think that you should be doing, start with less, right? Remove that barrier to entry on all of these things as much as you can. So let's just say it is an hour though. Depending on how long it takes to go to the gym, right, that will still be part of the time. So right before you leave, if you start that timer for an hour, then you get in your car and you go to the gym and you do everything that you're doing. And once the timer goes off, you leave. And a good progression for this as well is to get to a point where then you're starting your timer at the gym. So now you've increased the amount of time that you've actually spent exercising, but the total amount of time for this method, or for this way of behavior change, has stayed the same. And eventually you get to a point where you feel like you don't even need it at all. But it's really nice, just like the checklist, to put whatever is going on in your head and take it outside and put it on paper. Or in this case, put it on a timer so you don't have to worry about it anymore, right? You can get lost in the process, get into a flow state, and before you know it, that timer goes off, and it always feels much shorter than you think. Because you can allow yourself to say, I'm only going to be here for this certain amount of time, right? And if you're like me at times when there's a lot of things that I need to do, right, that gets in the way of me doing the next thing, because I'm so worried about, I have to do this today, I have to do that other thing today. But when I pre-plan in my head and think, well, I can spend this much amount of time on item A, this much amount of time on item B, and still have however much time to get home, to relax, or do whatever I need to do, laundry, things like that, because they all add up. And so when I acknowledge that and analyze my day and think, well, an hour here or an hour and a half here would be enough time for me to do all of this and not feel stressed about having less time later on. So I can spend an hour, or spend that hour, hour and a half, whatever it is on my timer, and then when it goes off, I'm done. I often do that when it comes to things like meditation. If I tell myself I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes, usually my timer is at 21 minutes. So I'll set 21 minutes, and then when that timer goes off, I'm going to go off to the next thing. So it's really a nice break within my day, because I plan that 21 minutes, I give myself some quiet, and often when that goes off is when I decide to go to the gym. So the timer goes off, I get up, I get my things, and I'm out the door. And it adds some structure to my day, and then again takes the stress off of what am I going to do next. And lastly, break things apart whenever you can. So whatever your first priority is that you feel like is going to be the most return on an investment for your time, but whatever that activity is too time consuming, or you often procrastinate about it because you feel like you don't have the time or energy or motivation to do it. So then it becomes harder to do. But if you break it apart, and let's just say the gym or your fitness is priority number one, and you want to go in and do cardio, you want to do some weights, and you want to do some stretching, because when you do all of those things, you feel better when you leave, and that's what you feel like you should be doing, which is understandable. But if you break those things apart, you get multiple benefits. So you could use that timer method to give yourself 15 minutes of a warm-up or cardio one day, and that still counts as exercise. A day or two later, you can set a timer for an hour and do some weights and hit the machines and work on getting a harder workout in. And then a couple days later, you can set a timer for 15 or 20 minutes and just work on stretching or doing some yoga or some foam rolling, to work on some of those sore muscles, whatever the case may be. And now you've just distributed what could have been one session's worth of time in the gym into 3 separate occasions, each being less time consuming than all of them together. And that way you don't have to stress out about being at the gym for too long one day and then waiting until however many days later that it may be that you have enough time again to go and do that same activity. Because I always think about procrastination as being something that we build up a whole lot of tension and pressure around, whatever those circumstances may be, and then that creates resistance within us. And that resistance is what keeps us from doing it. And it's like always pushing that thing away. We know it's there and it's close, but we're always keeping it at arm's length and waiting until the last moment that we actually have to do it, right? To have the motivation. It's as if that the negative emotions become greater and greater of an impetus to actually push us into the direction of getting that thing done. But when we break it into smaller pieces, those smaller pieces are much more manageable and don't create the same kind of resistance as the whole does. And so I hope these strategies help, and I invite you to try them out for yourself and see if you like them. Like I said, I made my own checklist, and I put a link in the description if you want to have that for yourself and use all those strategies that I use for myself and some of my clients that I've had in the past as well to make it even easier on you. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.